think I'm live. Let's see if I did this right. I'm going to post the link for everyone to join into our Slack chat room. All right, I am just waiting for people to join now. I've posted in Slack. I have fired up my camera. Let's see if it tells me how many people have joined so far. Hey, 4 people. Patrick. Rick, maybe? And Ella? Welcome. Can anybody say something in the chat room? Oh, Emma, hey. So, welcome to the live stream. It is 8:01, so I am going to get us started really quickly. One thing I learned from last week, we need to keep the live streams much shorter because I want everyone to be able to watch them in a timely manner. And I want to be able to record more and talk about more topics, and I don't want it to go over an hour. So tonight, the live stream is going to be probably the shortest one of the week. On Wednesday and Thursday, I do plan additional live streams where we will actually show some sample coding. In fact, tomorrow, Wednesday, I think we're going to do some of the exercises from Chapter 4 live. Like, I'll actually type it out so that you can see how I code HTML. And I'll also probably show you some tricks that will help you save some time. But tonight, we are talking about Chapter 3. Let me switch over to my presentation here. Oh, good. A few people of you have already joined. Let me go into presentation mode here. All right, so Chapter 3 is literally called Some Big Concepts You Need to Know. And what I like about our new textbook is that she doesn't waste any time getting to the big topics. Some of the things that are covered in this chapter are things that I waited until the second web design class before I even covered them. And I'm actually really excited to talk about them tonight because I think you use the web and you see these things in action. So I don't think it's that hard to talk about these conceptually. And I think this will give you a path or something to aim for as we're building our web pages even this week. So let's talk about some of those concepts. The chapter begins by talking about how we have a multitude of devices. When we are a web designer and we sit in front of our computer, we are looking right here at this device over here on the left. However, we now have to kind of remind ourselves that this is not how most people are using the internet. The reality is there are so many ways to view the web today. And this screenshot that was prepared by Brad Frost for a presentation is already out of date. Look, no one carries many of these phones or uses the internet with these types of phones, right? We've got even bigger phones now than we ever did before, and people are accessing the web more and more often with mobile devices. They're also putting things on TVs. Some of our screens are vertical, some of them are horizontal. We have a very different set of audience devices than we ever had 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And you have to think about how this is going to continue to evolve. Look on the right. We have devices that show the web on refrigerators or on mobile gaming devices that maybe don't have normal keyboards. There was actually a little screenshot that someone put together of a fake watch here, but I hate to tell you, it's now true. People are browsing the web on really tiny devices without any keyboard or mouse, or even the ability to touch on small links. So I remember when I first started, people were always assuming that the website that they were building had to be super fast so that people on slow phone connections could use their website. But it turns out, and I'm glad the book makes this point, that you can't really assume anything based on the screen size. Just because someone has a smaller device does not mean that they have a slow internet connection. In fact, some of our fastest home internet connections now are through cellular providers. And some of the devices that have the slowest or most laggy internet connection are desktops that are using satellite connections. So that kind of isn't something that you can count on being true. So you have to prepare your content to be used on different size screens, different speed connections, and you want your visitors to be able to get to the information and use the site regardless of if they're on a different size device than you developed it on, or even on a different speed internet connection than you developed it on. And to sum it up, there's this tweet that's quoted by our author, and I think it's a great one too, that says, "There is no mobile web." When I first started building web pages for mobile devices, we called them a special mobile version of the web. The truth is they're using the exact same internet, and we've never called the web the desktop web before, and we aren't going to call it the tablet web. It is one web, and people are going to use whichever device they own or have convenient to them to access your content. And we just have to live with that as web developers and web designers. And to bring that point home, in WWDC, in Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, WWDC, they actually showed off a new feature of watchOS 5 that I'm really excited about, that is going to allow you to click on links that someone might send you in a chat message, or to click on emails that have HTML content in them, and it will render a web page on this little tiny screen. In fact, I'm not even wearing my watch today, but it's really tiny, and you can't do much. But you can like double tap to zoom in, and you can, like I said, you usually open the browser by clicking on the link that someone sent you, and you will get a full web page rendered right on your wrist. I think that's absolutely amazing, and this is only possible because of the topics I'm going to talk about in the next couple slides. How do we deal with this multitude of devices? Well, like Stephen Hay said, there is no watch web. It's just the web. How do we handle this? How do we make sure that our awesome website like midmich.edu is going to work great on someone who has a desktop computer, but is going to work just as well for someone on a phone, and is going to work when someone sends them a link to a class on their watch that they can tap and read all that content? Well, there's two major approaches to web design that I want to share with you today from our book. One is called progressive enhancement, and one is called responsive web design. Progressive enhancement boils down to making sure that you have a strong foundation, and you add fancy features, fancy design on top of a solid foundation. And this really goes with our work on HTML this week. I talked about the trinity of web technologies and how HTML is the content. Well, we need to make sure that that content is rock solid as a foundation before we add styling or before we add JavaScript for interaction. So the best advice from our author is to stick to the standards that have been approved by the Worldwide Developer Consortium. That's the W3C in your quiz. And the good thing is that browser makers like Apple and Google and Mozilla, they actually participate in the review process for standards before they become official, and they will monitor these standards very closely. And so when a new standard is released, you can kind of count on newer versions of the browsers to adapt them or adopt them slowly but surely. So what's an example of progressive enhancement? I had to kind of dig out some examples from my history, and actually I was surprised to see that this is still a feature that is not available in all browsers. There is a new feature of HTML5 that allows you on a form to say that a certain field is a date value. And what will happen in a lot of new browsers is if you click on that date field, you can actually get a list of the months and calendar days and click on the calendar day that you want to select. But is that available on all browsers? Let's take a look. Chrome and Firefox, I was happy to find, actually support this field very well. If you load up a web page that asks you for your birthday, and someone has said that that is a date field in their HTML code, it will show MMDDYY, that's the format of the date, and when you click on that, it actually shows this little drop-down menu that lets you browse a calendar to pick a date. It's really nifty. So Chrome and Firefox have it. But Safari does not, and not all versions of Safari. Actually, on the left, this is a screenshot of Safari on my computer today. There is no date picker on the desktop version of Safari. What happens? Well, it actually just falls back to be a normal text field. So you can still type a number in there or any character that you want, and there's just another phase of this form when you submit it that will on the server side probably check to make sure that you entered a date value. But it isn't going to show you that handy drop-down menu. Now you might think, why is Apple terrible? Why don't they support this on desktop Safari? Well, I think that support may come to desktop Safari because for a long time on the right-hand side here, you'll see that mobile Safari has rendered this date field not as a text field, but as a drop-down menu that when you tap on it, it brings up this very specialized panel for choosing the month, the day, and the year, kind of in this scrolling carousel view that you can just flick up, or maybe it's more of a ticker. You can select the day, and it actually is smart enough to pre-select today's date because it's going to think that a date field might be close to today. So there you have it. A relatively new date field has been supported in 3 of 4 browsers that I tested. If a browser doesn't support it, it can gracefully fall back to just a plain text field. So how do you apply progressive enhancement to your designs overall? Well, like I said, it all starts with the HTML. One of the best examples of making sure that your foundation is good and writing good HTML that's organized and has headings and is outlined nicely is because a lot of the bots, they're called, the web crawlers that will actually browse the entire web and click on links and see what's on the web page, a lot of those are very unsophisticated browsers. I think Google's might be the most sophisticated now, but they'll actually browse the web without any JavaScript enabled, and they might not even pay attention to the design of your website. They just are looking at solely the content, and they will figure out if your site should show up in the search results based on the content. So if your foundation is strong, you can rest assured that you've probably applied progressive enhancement techniques here. And then as you learn more about CSS, you're going to learn that there's a lot of options with color and gradients and typography, and a lot of those are new features that are not supported on all browsers. So the goal here is whenever possible, provide a more simple, an older style. Here's the gradient example. If you want to show a blue gradient, it might be wise to set a background color first, so that if a browser does not have any understanding of the gradient feature, it will at least show that background color, and then leave that gradient feature for the browsers that know how to use it. So we're going to look at multiple examples of that later on in the semester. And you should make sure that your website works without any JavaScript enabled, if at all possible. Now there are a lot of sites that require JavaScript to work. In fact, to fill out form fields, to apply to to Mid-Michigan College, you might actually have to have JavaScript enabled for all of our sites to work. But for the main content websites that we host, we do our very best to make sure that all of that content shows up without JavaScript enabled, because we want to make sure that the bots that crawl our site can use it and see the content. So that's progressive enhancement. I also want to talk about responsive design, and I think that this is a concept that you are already familiar with, whether you realize it or not. Responsive design is a strategy for dealing with that multitude of devices where you don't know the screen size. You know, you're trying to make something show up on a tiny watch or show up on a large new phone or the big 27-inch display that you might have as a web designer. So the best way for me to show you responsive design is not in a slide, it's actually to pull up midmish.edu. So I am going to pull up our website, midmish.edu right here. Wait for it to load. This is the desktop size of our website. But we wanted to make sure that we built a website that also works on phones. So as you drag the width to be narrower and more narrow, you'll see some things start to change. The first stop here, it gets to like a tablet size, and you'll see that some of the menu items that don't necessarily fit shrink down and collapse. If you hit the mobile phone size, the content of the page actually changes dramatically. Our logo suddenly takes up more of the top banner, and the nav bar starts to get cropped off. And as it gets down to mobile phone size, you can see that actually our news is now listed in a way that it takes up the whole width of the page, and our calendar takes up the whole width. And the very bottom footer has kind of been collapsed. Actually, if you visit any other of our web pages rather than the front page, that recommended links section is closed by default. These logos stack on top of each other, and a special back to the top button appears. A lot of people spend a lot of time scrolling on their phone, and on certain devices you can tap the top of the screen to zip right up to the top, but on some devices people aren't used to that functionality. So one of the trends that we saw when we were building our website was to add this back to the top link. So you tap it and it jumps you right up back to the top. So if I had to make an animated GIF of responsive design, it'd probably be me sitting here and dragging a browser wider and more narrow. And I actually had found a web comic that talked about responsive design, and it kind of summed it up as 3 panels of someone dragging a window narrow and wide. And I can't find that anymore. So if anyone can find that on the internet, I would love to include that in my slides. This also holds true for our admissions app. So when you apply to go to mid and you look at our application form, we lay it out so that it looks great on a big desktop display, but as it shrinks down, you'll see that suddenly it relays itself out so that the form fields take up the whole width and the student ID card takes up the full width. And anything that had been 2 columns is now 1 column, and it kind of stacks on top of each other. This is extremely common on the web now. This used to be like a trend that not many people knew about or how to do, but now it's like table stakes for entering the web design world. And we talk about responsive design a lot more in Web 2. So I promise you that we'll do more of it there. What I will say is that some of our textbook chapters actually will have you practice some of the techniques needed for responsive design. So you might get some practice this semester, but we actually have special projects related to it that we bring out in the 2nd semester of our web design courses. So let me go back to presentation mode here. When mobile phones first came out, there was a different approach. Rather than building responsively designed websites because the technologies either weren't there or people hadn't figured out how to put them together, it was common practice to build a separate mobile optimized website. And our book calls them M-dot sites, and that's because you might have been familiar when if you visit like Facebook on a phone, it redirects you from facebook.com to m.facebook.com, and that's their mobile optimized version. And I think Amazon even does it to this day. Like if someone sends you a link and you're on a phone, it'll show you a mobile page instead of the desktop version. What I can say is neither Facebook nor Amazon are completely responsive yet. And I don't know what's motivating that, but they have decided to build separate experiences for the mobile optimized site and the full experience. But for just about every other service that I tried to find screenshots of, I think a lot of people have adopted responsive design. And I know for us at Mid, there's no way that we would build a separate second design site and have to maintain 2 copies of the same thing. It makes much more sense for us to support responsive design because then we get an awesome tablet site, we get an awesome desktop site that can be shrunk down or made really wide to show up on a TV. You really get more bang for your buck with a responsively designed website, and that's really where the industry is going. So the next topic in Chapter 3 that is very important is accessibility. And if you've never heard of accessibility before, and I try to describe it to people who've never worked with accessibility before, you might think right away that it's just for people that can't see or can't hear or who have motor impairments. And the truth is, it is accessible technologies and accessibility does help people who have impairments, but it's the right thing to do for everyone. And one of my favorite slides about accessibility is from the Microsoft Design Toolkit, and they present accessibility as a spectrum and a set of scenarios and situations that might be for someone permanent, but also might be temporary or even situational. And so one of my favorite examples is related to using like a mobile device differently in a different scenario. So when my son was born, I very quickly found it very beneficial to be able to browse mid websites on my phone late at night with one hand because I was holding my son when I was giving him a bottle late at night, and I couldn't have the volume up high, I couldn't have the screen very bright. So it was really important to me that the website be able to be used muted with low light and to be operable with just one hand scrolling up and down. So really there's this broad spectrum. And so what I'd like to do now, I think we have some people in the chat room here. It says we have 11 viewers. I'm not sure if all of these are students in Web 1. Maybe we have some friendly internet strangers in there too. I would like everyone to kind of think for a minute and maybe put in the chat room, how might a video transcript benefit everyone? Not just those who can't hear. That's a very clear win to have closed captioning. But how might a video transcript help you as a student in this web design class, even if you didn't have a need for for the words to be transcribed because you can't hear. So think about that. Write a few comments here in the Twitch channel, and I'm going to read them aloud. So no takers yet. I'm imagining the stream is a bit delayed. All right, so FJ Lewis says it's quicker to pick up visual information. It allows you to get a live viewpoint on it. Another student says I could read the transcript after watching the video to take notes on it. Absolutely. In fact, you might even be able to flip that around. Let me switch over to video only here. Transcript is a very powerful tool. Someone said that they like to be able to watch movies with the sound off to not bother anyone. Yeah, maybe the only time that you get to do homework is after your kids go to sleep or after everyone else has gone to sleep in the house. You don't want to blare me talking on this Twitch live stream. It'd be much better if when I upload the video, if I closed captioned it. And that is actually something that I try to do. If you go look at older videos and hit closed captioning, you'll see that I've tried to add them to the best of my ability. For taking notes, yes, I agree. It helps with notes. It helps with searching too. It's really hard to browse through this video after I post it, right? Wouldn't it be nice if you could just look through the transcript to scroll to exactly where you want to be and then watch that video? Yeah, so there's agreement in the chat room that it would be nice to go through the text more quickly than the video. And the other aspect of that I would say is helpful is some people are different type. There are different types of learners in the world. Some people really like to see something in action, and some people prefer to read it. So, and maybe that depends on like your first or second time going through the material. You might watch this whole video start to finish the first time, but if you're reviewing for an exam or you're trying to reference something later, it's much quicker to be able to skim through text. And someone pointed out that with the video too, you can speed up or go back on YouTube or on instructional videos, and that is definitely helpful too. All right, so thank you for participating in that discussion. Let's move along. So yes, accessibility is totally the right thing to do. It's also the law. Section 508 of the Americans with Disabilities Act requires that anyone that receives funding from the government, including Mid-Michigan College, has to ensure that all of their online materials are accessible. And we actually received a complaint from the Office of Civil Rights last year, and we are in the process of improving aspects of our website. We have actually chosen, this is quoted in, some of these technologies are quoted in the book, the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C, cares about accessibility, and they formed a working group to develop the WAI ARIA, the Accessible Rich Internet Application Specification, and they've actually worked to put forth a version 2.0 of web content accessibility guidelines, and we are choosing to adopt those for the Mid-Michigan Community College website. And just as an example of what some of these accessibility guidelines say, section 1.4 says that content has to be distinguishable. And so what that meant for our website when we used a tool, here's a screenshot of it called Site Improve, is we need to ensure that if we have color backgrounds and we have text on top of it, we need to make sure that the text has a certain contrast ratio from the background so that you can actually see the content. And what we found out is that some of the coloring that we had chosen, the official mid colors, did not work well with white text on it. We had this beautiful cyan color that we had launched our website with, and even with white text on it, it was difficult to perceive that. Now, we had heard that once or twice from people that were reviewing our website, but when we measured it with this accessibility checking tool, we discovered that a lot of our content just did not pass the requirements for the WCAG 2.0. So this tool pointed that out to us, and you can see a graph here that shows about the time where we decided to change our official website colors, and we were able to tweak it so that we passed that specification much more broadly on our website. There's still areas that we're tweaking the colors on to make them more legible, but this was the first thing that we tweaked in our improvement efforts. If you give me just a minute here, I am going to turn on Do Not Disturb so I don't get any other Slack notifications on the screen here. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone pointed out that I was still in video mode. Let me go back here. So accessibility. We already talked about this slide, how accessibility covers the range of scenarios. It can be permanent, temporary, situational. What I just talked about, and I'm sorry about this, was how it's also the law. I have a screenshot on here of the Site Improve tool. And if I get my big head out of the way here, this is the screenshot that shows when we made that tweak to our colors and how very quickly the number of problems with color on our website dropped down. Thank you for pointing that out in the chat room. I appreciate it. Okay, moving on from accessibility. You're going to hear accessibility more from me throughout the semester because it is something we're trying to improve on the MID website, but also because it's in our textbook. And I'm so happy that our author has chosen to include little notes in the side about accessibility along the way. She's also going to talk about performance a lot because, as you imagine, when you're using the web, you don't like to wait. We want it to be fast. So one of the things that I like to mention regarding site performance is something that you see that's very common on the web. If you try to view the source of web pages, you might find that it's really hard to read that source code because there's like no line breaks and no spaces in between the code and the text. And that's actually stemming from the desire to make our web pages as fast as possible. We as humans need the line breaks and the new spaces and the tabs to be able to visually see the difference between certain tags. A computer doesn't care about any of that. So one of the things that you can do to remove just a little bit of the baggage on your website is to remove all those unnecessary spaces, essentially make the entire web page feel like it's one line of text, a really wide, long piece of text. And that will shave off some of the time it takes to download those files. Now there are much more advanced techniques for improving site performance. What I wanted to just kind of show you is one, that is important, and two, that we're working on it. So I think I already went to midmish.edu earlier in the slides, and it was slow. We had to wait way longer than anyone on our programming team wants now. And we are working on new versions of our site that are fast. And so one of them that I wanted to show, just in a quick A/B test here, get out of here. I am going to pull up midmish.edu and hit enter. There was a couple seconds there, right? And now it's done loading. Wouldn't it be great if the entire Midmish website that you use felt like this? It's loaded. I hit enter and it was loaded. I'm going to click on one of these links. Let's say we wanted to take a look at our nursing associate degree. If I click on this link, am I going to have to wait that long? No, it's instantaneous. We are working to use some new technologies to make our website feel this fast rather than feeling, and I hate doing this, it pains me now, rather than feeling this fast. We want it to be much, much faster. So one of the tools that we're using to analyze the performance of our site is actually built into our browser. Let's see if I can get to my slides here again. We're going to be using a lot of the development tools to inspect our website. And in fact, there's a whole week dedicated to the web inspector that I love coming up. I think it's either week 4 or week 5. What I will say and show you tonight is one of the tabs in the web inspector is a network tab or a performance tab. And these are designed to be open while you're loading up the web page. And it will show you a waterfall chart, which will point out how long different parts of displaying your web page take. And so what you can tell from this screenshot here is that there is a photo called HRA Media Day. It's actually this big image right here that if you look, it's 1.4 megabytes. It's kind of a large image. That takes almost 2 seconds for it to download. So in a waterfall chart, the things that take up more time have a wider bar. And so you can kind of get a feel for which of the pieces of your web page are slowing it down. And then when you can speed up a site, you'll see that these bars are all kind of more equal here. They're all actually very tiny. Nothing on here takes over a second to load. In fact, everything on here is usually a couple hundred milliseconds. That's the speed that we're trying to go for here on the new website. So I'm going to switch over to video only mode. Those were the topics from chapter 3 that I wanted to cover. We talked about the multitude of devices, how we can compensate for that and actually keep our sanity by using progressive enhancement, responsive design. We talked about the importance of accessibility, and we talked about performance. Those are things that I promise you are going to be common trends as you start working with web design. It's something that we've been working on at Mid now for a couple years, and every time we find a way to make a site faster or make it more accessible, there's more work to be done to update all of our thousands of web pages. Are there any questions that I can go over right now? It's about 8:30. We are under a half an hour. I am so proud of that. I'm going to leave this up just for a couple minutes to see if you guys have questions. I promise you that the next few live streams are going to actually show coding that you will need and benefit from as you work through chapters 4 and 5. Chapter 3 is actually a pretty short chapter, so hopefully this really cements the knowledge and helps you finish the quiz that's listed in Moodle for the week. Question in the chat room: how does something like pre-caching a website or saving settings on it like passwords or favorites improve loading speed, since that information is already semi-stored on the PC? You can actually see this in the waterfall chart. If you reload a web page that you're on, it will generally not reload everything. It'll try to reload maybe the HTML page part, but it will keep all the fonts cached on your computer. So I think you could kind of see that on this pathway site. Let me see if I can get out of it real quick here. If I go to this pathway site, in Chrome you can actually disable the cache by holding Shift. So you saw that little flash where the fonts weren't there yet. Let me do that one more time. When I'm holding Shift, it is ignoring the entire cache and downloading everything. If I just hit refresh now in normal mode, you actually won't even see the flash of content, because all of the CSS and all of the fonts are kind of kept downloaded on your computer. So you're right that, oh, you know what? I'm doing that thing again where I forget to put the website up. Let me do this again. If I hold down Shift and refresh the website, you're going to see that flash where the font doesn't exist there. It was just really brief. I'm going to do it one more time. So as the font is downloading in the background, I still showed the web page, but then the font was available. It refreshed what it was showing on the web page. Whereas if I just normally click refresh, you don't even notice that, because it knows it already downloaded the fonts. It keeps them cached. That does speed up the website. In fact, generally, if you visit someone's front page, like you visit midmich.edu and then you navigate to the next page, so you go look at this leadership event that we have posted, it doesn't have to re-download any logos. It generally doesn't have to re-download the styles that give it the navbar this color. All that is trying to download is the new page content. That's built into browsers, and it just happens. So I hope that helps. You can do other techniques to preload more in the background. You know the term buffering when you're looking at a video and it's starting to download in the background? There are ways to do similar things with a web page, and our new pathway site tries to do that. You can actually load the content of like the very next page that someone might click on before they actually click on it. So someone mentioned favorites. What I will tell you is if you have like favorites in your bar up here at the top, in Chrome, and I think even in Safari and on your mobile device, your phone or your computer might actually fetch those documents on a regular basis in the background, so that when you try to go to your favorite website, it already has a fresh copy of it. I know that Chrome in particular, if you start like searching for something, if I start typing midmich.edu, it is actually trying to autocomplete the URL in the top there, and in the background it tries to prefetch that first result too. So I think those are a couple examples that are along the lines of what you were talking about. I don't know if saving passwords really has any effect on performance. It definitely speeds up your usage of the website. You don't have to type in a long password. But I don't know if it actually speeds up the experience besides that. I'm not understanding the instructions on how to complete the contribute a tag definition to the HTML tag database. Maybe I can explain it better. I will try to do one better. I will try to show it off here right on the screen. So the goal of the tag database is that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of tags covered in like the first 3 chapters of like chapter 4, 5, and 6. And what I wanted to do is give everyone the chance to pick a tag that no one else has talked about and give a little introduction to it. And I even wanted to have you upload an example of that tag in action. So I did it for a paragraph. If I go into the HTML tag database, Again, this is the first semester that we're using this activity, so I hope the settings are right. It looks like I've got an example from Emma posted on here. So I'll use mine as an example here. When I added this, I entered the tag name. So I picked the P paragraph tag, which normally when it's typed out in HTML looks a lot different. It usually looks like this. This is a paragraph. But what I discovered in Moodle is it is going to eat these tags for lunch here. When you actually posted that, or when I posted it this weekend, it cut off the bracket parts, and so you didn't actually see the tags. So I had to readjust our approach here. And so what I'm asking you to do is enter just the tag name. So for the paragraph tag, that is just the word P. So that is what I'm having you post for tag name. It'll ask you, is this an empty element? And I think the textbook does a great job of explaining this along the way when it introduces tags. But some tags, like paragraphs, have to open and they have to close, and then the content goes in between. So the opening tag is like where it starts, and the closing tag signifies the end of that tag and that element. Some tags do not require that, and I don't want to give too many away. I will say that there is one called a horizontal rule, and that represents just a line. That is a tag that is considered an empty tag. You don't have to open and close it because you don't have to say where the line begins and where the line ends. It's a line. You put a line here, and it's going to stretch across the whole width of the page. So that is an example of where I would say, yes, it is an empty element. But for my paragraph tag, I say, no, it requires a closing tag after its opening tag. And then description, this is for you to kind of explain where you would use that tag, how common it is, what you see it being used for on the web. And I didn't have a lot to say about the paragraph tag, to be honest. What I will say is probably the most common tag, and it's used to indicate paragraphs, and it sets those paragraphs off with space. So if you're looking up here, this is an example of a paragraph on Moodle, and this is another paragraph. When a paragraph ends and another one begins, there's automatically some white space in between them, and that's what I was trying to describe in my description. And then the only other thing that I require is for you to upload an HTML file that shows off that tag in action. And this doesn't have to be too elaborate. I don't need a lot of content on the page. I'd rather it focus just on your tag. So here is my page that demonstrates the paragraph tag. I actually just put 3 paragraphs on there, and you can see that there's space in between it. If you look at the source of what I uploaded, you'll see that I have the starting HTML and the ending HTML that I'm going to cover, I think, tomorrow night in the live stream. And in the middle, this was the tag that I demonstrated. So I hope that helps you. When you go into here, you'll want to look at the list to see what people have uploaded already. It looks like there's a few already, and then you click Add Entry to add your own. You'll just fill out this form, write a description, and upload your sample of that tag in action. Let me take a look in here. Oh, that helps. Thank you. Okay, I'm glad that described it. Can we use parts of websites then, like the ones we showed in the video, if we cite where it comes from and provide a source link for the HTML? In your description, I think you can talk about that, but what I would like you to upload is an HTML file that you write. And that's mostly because the examples that you found on the internet are probably elaborate, and they probably have CSS that is affecting their style, and I really just care about the HTML right now. So we're going to keep it plain and simple. Just upload a very, very basic example of that tag in action. I'm not giving you points for fanciness. I just want you to show the tag in action. And what we're going to have as a class is a list of a bunch of tags that we can use. So you probably aren't going to memorize hundreds of tags, right? But when you're looking for, like if I tell you on the next assignment that I want you to include a list, well, I'm hopeful that you can go into this tag database, find the ones that are related to a list, and maybe you don't even have to browse through them all. You should be able to search, and hopefully you'll be able to look for the word list, and someone will have put that in their description, and you'll be able to read a little bit about how it works. Download an example, take some of their code, and tweak it to be what you want. Yeah, so when I said the word list, it sounds like someone wrote li, that tag, in the chat room. li is used in a couple different types of lists. So I'm hopeful that if one student writes about the unordered list, another student will write about the ordered list or the definition list. And you'll see that between a couple of those lists, they both use the li tag as well. All right, it is 8:40. Any other questions before I wrap this up for tonight? All right, I got an answer back that says they don't have any questions right now. They can go back to reading. And I know that this week is a lot of reading, but I think that once we get past this week and you start building some sample web pages, things are going to start to click. So I appreciate everyone's patience, and I appreciate you joining the live stream or watching it after the fact. I will see you all again very soon.